year is 1945. World War II is coming to a close as the Allies close in on Germany and Japan. After 6 years of war and indiscriminate bombing, much of Europe is destroyed. With over 73 million people dead, the slow process of demilitarizing economies and rebuilding societies begins. However, peace is fragile between the two superpowers. With the US having concluded its role in World War II with the use of the nuclear bomb, it has begun an age of brinksmanship and potential Armageddon with the Cold War. Both nations prepare for a long struggle to determine the New World Order. The US plants its flag firmly in European development with the Marshall Plan. The late 1940s can be characterized as a new beginning for many. The three key themes describing this period are convenience, patriotism, and feature-focused marketing. Meanwhile, designers such as Raymond Loewy are taking advantage of the recent history of militarism in creating consumer products, mimicking the same tough and ready style of military tools. Peretz Rosenbaum, more commonly known by the name Paul Rand, a name created to hide his Jewish identity, began his career. Alexei Brodovich, in the midst of his 24 career as art director at Harper's Bazaar, is creating the iconic covers that he is known for. In America, as soldiers return home, film admissions drop due to the reorienting of life post-war. Despite this, innovations such as Technicolor film see their first use on the silver screen in Son of Lassie. On TV, we see the first utilization of TV sets to create video advertisements. Soon after the war, life across the US and Europe begins to return to normal, and so too do cultural products. New film genres such as film noir can be exhibited through the movies Born in Paris and The Postman Always Rings Twice. As the US struggles to establish itself as a global hegemon, it also begins to initiate a new wave of anti-communism. The House Un-American Activities Committee is formed, and in turn creates its first Hollywood blacklist. In 1948, United States versus Paramount Pictures is decided by the Supreme Court, finally preventing film studios from owning their own theaters, and in turn beginning the breakup of studios and theaters. Fashion begins evolving into a new post-war age, with Christian Dior launching the new look in Paris, and the iconic poodle skirt quickly becoming popular. It is 1950, and the US is at war with the People's Republic of Korea. Despite the beginning of America's forgotten war, this is generally a period of perkiness and optimism. Americans' eyes are looking toward the future, which for many is utopian. The transistor, the TV, and even the potential of space travel are in the minds of citizens. In general, within American cultural products, there's a glossy sheen over often repressive themes. There are no warnings on cigarette packs, advertisements and media show women gladly performing housework in pearls and heels. Strong, vibrant colors are used to convey satisfaction and wealth. Across American society, conservatism, chauvinism, and sexism play major themes in cultural products. As part of anti-colonial resistance worldwide, Vietnam begins a war for its independence that will involve a US invasion 10 years later. Cuba concludes its revolution at the end of the decade, overthrowing the vicious dictatorship of Fulgencio Batista and establishing a People's Republic. Industrial design begins its evolution from its initial development during wartime. The golden age of the American car begins with forms reminiscent of aircraft, such as tail fins on the 1957 Golden Hawk. New materials such as fiberglass allow for molded pieces with flowing forms within products and allowing mass production of sleek, futuristic-looking devices. The invention of the MOSFET transistor allows for much smaller electronic devices, no longer requiring vacuum tubes. This in turn leads to devices with incredible amounts of switches and functions. Perhaps too many. Otto Storch begins working at McCall's as art director, ushering in a golden age of magazine design. This period features great designers such as C.P. Pinellas, one of the first female art directors at several major magazines. Known for bringing fine art into mainstream media through similar design methodologies to the likes of Otto and Alexei Bronovich. This period also features the likes of Milton Glaser, creator of the I Heart New York branding. Brands such as Bell and Howell, Hoover and Dormeyer, Pushpin Studio, a famous graphic design studio known for its distinctive illustration style, featuring bulgy, three-dimensional interpretations of historical styles, is also established during this period. In 1957, Helvetica, perhaps the most popular font of all time, is invented, ushering in an age of the Swiss style of graphic design. This style, with its clean use of typography, shapes, and colors, were championed by the likes of Josef Müller-Brockmann and design firms such as Chermayeff, Geismar, and Haviv. Eastman color is introduced, providing a much cheaper alternative to Technicolor, and making color film in general more accessible. As society optimistically looks forward to the future, the first sci-fi film, Destination Moon, is introduced. Alfred Hitchcock releases Strangers on a Train, beginning a period of some of his most praised films. Saul Bass skyrockets to fame with The Man with the Golden Arm and its iconic title sequence. As more artists begin to push the boundaries of film, push back against constructs such as the Hays Code, which intend to limit cultural products that did not align with conservative values at the time. As more Americans return to the theater, productions grow in size, with The Ten Commandments releasing in 1957. The largest production to date. In fashion, Claire McCardle, an American fashion designer known for creating American sportswear, becomes partner at Townley. In the meantime, Charles James conceives of the four-leaf clover dress, or abstract ball gown, which became known as one of his best creations of all time. The 60s broke away from the 50s in an explosion. The US used its booming economy to develop its doctrine of American primacy through both economic and military means. The optimism of the 50s, however, could not cover up America's ruthless history of slavery, white supremacy, and native genocide. The 60s saw an explosion of mobilization against traditional American conservative thought in the form of counterculture, civil rights, and political activism. As the struggle for a new America began, so too did the violent counter-mobilization. Civil rights icons such as Malcolm X and Martin Luther King Jr. were both assassinated during this decade. State organizations such as the local police forces as well as the FBI violently struggled to contain these social movements. This period of U.S. history is defined by these struggles. In industrial design, modernism continues to thrive, particularly within German products such as the iconic Braun radio. In advertising and graphic design, the geometric layouts of the 50s were often replaced by dizzying optical illusions with repeating patterns. These dizzying patterns were utilized by designers such as Wes Wilson and Victor Moscoso, who became synonymous with the psychedelia that characterized that decade. The combination of neon colors and abstract repeating forms would not only characterize an art style, but the coming countercultural movement. Artists such as Andy Warhol began to bridge the gap between commercial and literary art. This blurring of the line between brand and consumer identity, known as the creative revolution of the 60s and 70s, began with famous advertisements such as Volkswagen's Think Small ad. These new advertisements relied more on big ideas. One of the best examples of this decade is the Pepsi Generation campaign, whose advertisements focused less on selling their product and more on influencing a whole lifestyle of potential consumers to come. The 1960s was a period of turmoil for the film industry. Many viewers were fed up with the repressive and conservative themes being produced by these studios. Their inability to develop ideology of their films in line with the masses led to lower and lower turnout. Even huge productions such as Cleopatra and Dr. Dolittle ended up flopping. This showcased studios' inability to connect with their audiences. The collapsing of the studio system only reinforced the revolutionary tendencies of the US at this time. With the struggle for civil rights and counterculture, cultural institutions such as Hollywood were stuck between institutional inertia and the will of the masses. Still, despite this turmoil, classics such as the James Bond franchise saw their first production in the form of Dr. No. This film spearheaded a swath of spy and heist-themed movies that continue today. In the meantime, Hitchcock continues producing films such as Psycho and The Birds, which mark a turn towards psychological horror in his productions. In fashion, the 1960s took influence from developing graphic design and psychedelia. Menswear saw an increasing amount of color and pattern, military influence, and new fashion icons in the form of rock stars. This could be exemplified by the iconic collarless jacket, popularized by the Beatles in 1963. These rock stars, such as the Beatles, Jimi Hendrix, and Mick Jagger, among others, became a primary influence on men's fashion.